Good morning, everybody. An absolute pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to have hopefully a lively discussion with our esteemed panel. You know, the industry, the IT industry, but in general industry, because of technology, is changing incredibly fast. So when previous speakers were talking about how difficult it is for education to keep pace with the changes in industry, at times it's difficult for industry to keep paces with the technological changes that are actually driving a lot of innovation. And the challenge is if you don't stay on top of and ahead of innovation, you lose as a business, as a company, you lose competitiveness. And that can happen very, very quickly. We've seen, I think the telecoms industry is a very good example of how some of the leading telecoms have lost market share to other companies because other companies innovated more quickly. And so it's a very tough environment where the technological changes are driving that innovation, but it also requires us to have a readily available, highly skilled workforce, and therein lies the challenge. So we were interested as Oracle in chairing this panel because we too, as a large employer, as a large company around the world, a very global company, we're constantly looking for new talent, developing new talent and trying to retain the talent that we have. Because having that talent is very important to ensure that we as a company can remain innovative and we can remain at the top of our field. It's the same for our customers, it's the same for our partners. And around the Middle East and North Africa region, what we see is that partners and customers want to source local talent. They want to focus on hiring locals to do this work. And so we need to work to make sure that those skills are available. On the other side, you also need to look at, and we understand how governments are putting in place many policies, ministries of labour, ministries of education, to make sure youth are ready. They have the skills that are needed. But they also need systems to track their progress against those goals. And how do you do that? Well, yesterday actually we took the opportunity while we were at this conference in Jordan to launch a new global education solution called the Oracle Learning Information Exchange that looks at bringing together all of the data and all of the information that is collected about students, their progress, from parents, from teachers, information on courseware, on qualifications. How do you bring all that together from disparate systems and turn it into meaningful information that can help you track your progress against goals and then course correct if you need to, or actually share best practices where you've seen you've been able to measure outcomes and be very successful. So that's a solution that we are very excited about, and if you want to learn more about that while we're here, there are many Oracle staff around. You'll find them at the booth as well, and you can look for more information on that. But as I said, that skills piece and developing those skills is incredibly important. And in Oracle, we spend a lot of time and resources trying to build those skills. Work with partners such as ministries of education, the ministries of labour, to make sure that we can help in that fairly big challenge that is there today. We have training programs, we have teacher professional development programs, workforce development programs, and internship programs to really try and help governments and the countries where we do business make sure that their workforce is skilled for the future. Our Oracle Academy program supports over 160,000 students in the Middle East North Africa region, which is great, but we know we have a lot more to do. And as part of supporting the universities and vocational schools around the region, we know we need to help also focus on training faculty, because keeping their skills up to date is equally important in the challenge to make sure that we have industry-ready students. So that's just a little bit about why we wanted to chair this session today. It's a topic that's very close to our hearts, as I know it is for many of the industry partners that are here today, and obviously the government agencies that are here and our universities. So this panel is really all about, you know, the skills gap. And what are we doing to address that skills gap? What's going well? Maybe what do we need to change? How can the education institutions work with industry to make that happen. So what we need to do to improve and then also measure the readiness of our students in terms of their employability. So I'd like to address our first question to the Minister of Labour and Transport from Jordan, Professor Katamine. And that question is, you know, university qualifications in the region, they've increased dramatically in the last decade. But what is the main reason that those qualifications are not translating directly into jobs?
All right, thank you all very much for this opportunity. I'd like to start by thanking the organizer for such an opportunity to be able to meet distinguished guests from all over the world. It's a sincere appreciation of this event, which is obviously going to leave us with a lot of memories and a lot of lists of what to do next in order to sort out lots of issues related to the main means of improving societies. I'd like to take your question as a title like, for example, education for employment. I think this is the issue that we are having to tackle at the moment. And probably I should add that we cannot change results unless we change the process. And obviously, the way we do things, this is what we have to really look into. In Jordan, and I am assuming that Jordan is a typical developing country that is facing this serious problem, having been in education for almost 20 years in a number of universities, and I definitely have noticed the bridges between the education itself and the labor market is almost not in existence at all. I have looked into it, and I probably could comment on 4 important parameters. Number one is the expertise of the teachers. In the West, as I know it, everyone must have a PGCE prior to actually being able to teach at school level and probably at university level. This in itself would allow teachers to diagnose issues and put forward remedial measures and measures of how to sort out a particular problem of this nature. And this is not in existence in Jordan and definitely not in many developing world. The other issue, obviously, is the lack of programs that are embedded within the education system in Jordan. And basically, we have, for example, about 33 universities, but mainly they are all teaching institutes. They don't give any room for communication skills, for interdisciplinary skills, for any skills that would be necessary for students to be equipping themselves with before actually launching their life into the labor market. The third issue is we are following the American system of credit hours. Basically, any student can go into universities and spend 15 to 20 credit hours a week without any extracurriculum activities, which means they have plenty of time and no one is directing them to actually move into means of looking into how they could actually interact with local communities and how could they build on means of moving into the career that they have initially entered the universities for. The fourth part, obviously, is the pressure group that we would be expecting from the labor market itself is not in existence. So the 4 parameters suggest that there is definitely a source of lack of communication between the educational institutes or institutions, starting from the grassroots at schools, which is again the most important part, which is again is very much absent. And then that would unfortunately have caused us to have the serious issue that you just mentioned, Orla. Thank you.
And Professor Cook, would you like to, from the academic perspective, perhaps address that question from the academic side?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. We've talked a lot about ICT in higher education yesterday and today. And it's interesting that just this week a new book has come out, published by the Chronicle of Higher Education, called Rebooting the Academy. And it contains 10 essays of academics who are what I can call walking the walk and not simply talking the talk about introducing technology into higher education. If we talk about vocational skills and higher education, that's a union that's not made in heaven. It's not part of the normal academics thought process. And I want to distinguish a little bit later between vocational or job-specific skills and general skills, which are important for all of our graduates to have. So we have a linear relationship between the university and we have than the set of skills that our graduates have. And if we continue that, we also have the relationship between the employers, both public and private sector. But I like to look at that not as a linear relationship, but as a triangular relationship. And as the minister has just mentioned, what is lacking in many institutions is a strong relationship with the public and private sector employers. And we have to think of the best ways we can to bridge that gap of knowledge. There are several things that institutions can do, and many of them are doing it. And that includes, of course, having professional development for these companies on their campus, getting involved with internships. This is building knowledge of what the employers need, and it helps guide the universities towards the directions that they can take. We also have the situation of possibly doing case studies. In business and in science, most of the books that we use today are American books with practically zero local or regional content. Now, we've talked to a lot of publishers, and we see the future in digital books in the university. Well, that's the ideal chance we have of introducing very easily local content into our curriculum. And the more local content we can introduce, not only will the academy understand more of the problems of the business sector, but the students also will understand more of these problems. Now, I want to just finish with a comment about what we've tried to do at GUST in Kuwait. We have a practicum course required of all our business graduates and computer science graduates to try to address what I believe are the important skill sets that our students must have when they leave. Mr. Luis Pinto in the session this morning used 4 labels. The labels I'm going to use are very, very similar, but they must have communication skills, they must have numeracy skills, they must have digital skills, but most importantly, critical thinking skills. Because irrespective of where they're going to work, they can use all of these skills in the workplace. And this is something that the Academy would accept that is their responsibility to try to get the students to have. What we have done is we've created a practicum required of all business students and all computer science students, which ends up in the case of business giving them 12 international certificates in project management. In IT, there are 7 of them, Microsoft Office skills, plus e-commerce and creative writing. With Mac Skills International, we have business technical writing, which is an important communication skill. And in our Leaders of the Future module, we talk about leadership skills, entrepreneurial skills, communication skills, and presentation skills. And then we supplement that with skills related to the feedback that we get from the companies that hire our students, where they say they have weaknesses. I'll just give one example. Our students, because they're educated in English, don't know the Arabic terms in accounting. So all those accounting students, and we have 400 majors in accounting, we try to teach them the skills in accounting. Now, does this work? Well, you know the employment scene in the Levant and in the Gulf, and you know how important the public sector is as an employer. Actually, of the 80% of our students are employed after 6 months, 75% of them are working for the private sector. And I think this kind of practicum that our students have taken prepares them very well for working in the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe just on that note, I know from speaking earlier to His Excellency Dara, Yara, that you also, in Iraq, your ministry has been responsible for putting together a guide that, again, takes an approach at these life skills, as you call them, or the critical thinking skills and other skills that are required to be successful. Would you just like to perhaps add to what Professor Cook has just said?
That's working. Thank you and good morning all.
I would like to speak in Arabic since I want to keep the balance because everybody was speaking in English. I would like to speak in Arabic, sorry. In the Ministry of Social Affairs, we have worked on this aspect a lot, where Iraq in dire need of the life skills, especially the skills related to the young generation or the new generation, because of the consequences of the previous regimes and the accumulations, the psychological accumulations that resulted within themselves. So we needed to work with international partners and national partners. The international partners like the ILO and UNFPA, and some national partners such as the Ministry of Education in Iraq, the Ministry of Youth, in order to issue a guidance regarding the operational skills for the lifestyle of the young generation in Iraq. Within 2 years of the excessive studies and after the cooperation with these ministries, and Mr. Adnan, he's available, and I think that he was the head of the committee, and I was the head of the steering committee for the Ministry of Labor and Social Development. We worked on that guidance. The guidance, what is the objective of having that guidance? It aims at building the capacities of the young generation in their life through providing a scientific material regarding the concept of the human material, human sciences, that is aiming to have to be acquired by the young generation, and also it aims at providing plans and programs in order to enhance their positive growth that will be adopted by their behavior in different aspects of their life, where they can play effectively their roles in building their communities. The targeted group of the guidance are the vendors, the teachers, the trainers in different programs that are directed to young generation. And we are talking about the ages of 12 until 24 between the Ministry of Education, the youth, and different organizations of the civil society or the civil society institutions in Iraq. The guidance actually aims at also, by its nature, it's working according to two concepts. The first one, it is supported by the three ministries that I have mentioned and different civil society institutions in order to develop their skills through two main integrated methodologies. The first methodology is where the human or life skills are being developed through the educational process, and this is related to the Education, Minister of Education. The other one is unique for being concentrating on training the young generation on using different skills in order to enhance their self-confidence from one part and enhancing their relationships between each other from another part. The Iraqi community is in dire need for these skills because it's a community, it's like a bouquet of flowers that is including different sects, religious sects, and we have a lot of variety in our Iraqi community, and this is the beauty of it. The units that is forming this guidance is the first one is how to know the skills, how to know the emotional skills. The first one, how to know the how to estimate the self-estimate, how to do the self-estimation. There are several subjects such as creativity thinking, critical thinking, decision making and finding solutions, and the social skills. This is the last one, and also communicating effectively, sympathizing, the behavior, the management of conflicts or conflict management, and working in a team. The fifth unit is how to apply these skills, and there is actually an annex or a supplement for this guidance that is giving you the program and the deadlines of providing that work. So this guidance, in my point of view, is considered to be very important and extremely important for the Iraqi population, since it gives the Iraqi youth how to start for the renaissance in the community, and to understand that the past, the present, and the future is very important for any country.
Thank you very much. So I think what's coming out loud and clear are, these interpersonal skills, communication skills, leadership, teamwork. All of these skills are absolutely critical to employability. In a recent survey, employers stated that 90% of applicants had poor communication skills. What can be done in schools and universities to improve this? And I'd like to address that question to Ms. Al-Rashid.
Thank you, Orla. The thing that we're seeing these days is that the whole generation is actually changing with technology and with the fast pace that we're living. The whole education system, I'm sorry to say, but it has to adapt to these new students, whereas the professor used to be the leader of the classroom. They was used to transmit the information. Everybody would just listen, absorb it. Nowadays, everything's actually changing, and communication skills of professors themselves are also being reconsidered. The way that they give them the information, the way that they prepare them for the job market. It's not anymore about getting a good grade and getting just a degree in university that actually matters to employers these days. They assess the fresh graduate as a professional, not just as someone who knows the stuff. And I know communication skills are not at the level that employers are looking for, but it's not just communication skills, unfortunately. It's also some of the technical skills and some of the language skills that employers are looking for. As Professor Cook said, it's really important to build all the skills that are needed into the curriculum and have those students graduate with a package with everything that employers are actually looking for. Feedback from employers is actually essential in building those programs, but also stuff like team projects. Let's not base the grade on individual exam results. Let's build a team that works on something together. That's not necessarily friends who are working on a project. Let's just have a diverse team that will actually disagree, that has to communicate their ideas to each other, and then that has to present that project or that problem solution to the rest of the class. I think these are some of the major points to consider in universities and when designing curricula and when discussing with employers and professors all at the same time.
Sure. A very, very, I think, pertinent point. I think we keep coming back to, speaking of communication, perhaps is there enough dialogue going on between industry and the academic community and the education sector to ensure that we are working together, that we understand each other in terms of what we need to do collectively to prepare young people and youth for jobs in Middle East and North Africa. Mr. Shamlawi, would you like to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Orla, and thanks for everyone who actually have addressed the issue of gap between academia and private sector. There are two actually conflicting arguments around this. Some people stated that We don't have communication between private sector and academia. And there is another argument that basically says we have over-communication between academia and private sector. And these are two arguments from two different sides. I would say the problem is not with lack of communication or with over-communicating, it's the lack of standards between the two. So if we're not talking the same language between private sector and academia, of course they will not understand each other, and that's really what's happening. I'll give you an example. The ICT Association of Jordan, INTAJ, in cooperation with a number of ministries and a number of bodies, and our close partner is the Ministry of ICT and the Ministry of Labor as well in Jordan. We've been doing a number of assessments every year of the gap between academia and private sector. And that gap has been, or that these reports have been published to universities over and over. The problem has been that in a lot of cases, the two sides cannot communicate in the same language, and would result in quote-unquote failure. Because if universities cannot understand the requirements of the private sector in their own language to translate it into requirements in curricula, then they cannot reflect that into curricula, and hence basically it will not be translated into the students. So in other words, how are we getting into this? We're getting into this because the accreditation of academic institutions has been always done based on one, quantitative numbers. How big is the university? How many students can the university actually include? Or how many students can the school include, or the college include? What's the ratio of professors to students? Well, no one has asked basically what is the average time of employment of graduates of a university or a college. That is not one of the indicators that universities have. So basically the academic side, they are bound by the accreditation standards, and the accreditation standards only look at the number of hours these students have actually completed. But it's not taking into consideration the private sector requirements, or how close is the curricula to the private sector requirements, what creates the problem that people are measured, or universities are measured against these accreditation standards, and students will be graduated upon these standards, and that does not take care of the private sector requirements. So the gap, in essence, has been created from two sides, and this is what we're getting into by the end of the day. What has really created, aside from all the politics, what has really created the Arab Spring? It's really employment, it's really jobs, economic opportunities. That's really what has created all of the stuff around us in the past 2 years, aside from politics. Leave politics aside. So what is really important today? Education or employment? Well, one is leading to the other. That's for a fact. But in essence, today what's important is to find jobs. And what's important is whether you change the curricula in universities, or you adapt it, or you scrap it, or you add vocational skills on top, or do whatever, what's important is to match what the industry needs and what the industry wants in order to fill these jobs. I'll give a few numbers just as an indicator. We're graduating 5,700 ICT graduates this year in Jordan, and the industry will probably absorb half of them. So the other half will not find jobs. This is really a fact of the surveys and the number of studies that we conduct. The total number of ICT workforce in the sector is approximately 16,000 people. There are 22,000 people in colleges right now studying ICT and related majors. So in essence, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to be actually graduating over our capacity to absorb in the private sector. That's a fact as well. So what do we do with these? And how can we absorb them? It's two things. One, you need to create more economic opportunities so you can actually absorb more employees. But what's important, how do you do that if the graduates are not really equipped to serve the sector? So these are some of the challenges that we've been going through. And again, we believe that the common grounds of communication between private sector and academia need to be set in terms of standards. The most important thing today, technology changes every 2 to 4 years. In the old days, it used to change every 8 to 10 years. So it used to be more stable. Today, curricula in universities is only reviewed at 8 years, between 6 and 8 years. So by the time the curricula is actually changed, technology would have probably passed 2 years. 5 years ago, if we're talking about people who entered the universities 4 or 5 years ago, that's the time when Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn were only startups. They did not exist on the map. So basically, technology has changed over 4 years. That it's no longer only a textbook. Someone has mentioned YouTube. Well, YouTube today is a very good educational tool if you know how to use it properly and you know how to integrate it into the system. I'll stop on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's all very interesting, and I'd like to turn to Dr. Hasna. You were nodding as our esteemed guest here was presenting the industry perspective. It would appear that you're, even coming from the academic side, that you're in agreement on many points, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Let me start by stating one important statement, which is, regardless of what we do in the university, our graduates will not be able to be functional from day one. We have to take this as a fact. So companies, there is a role that companies and government should play in training new, fresh graduates. And this is everywhere. Even if somebody with experience changes jobs, he or she will not be functional from day one. So there always should be some training in the job market. Talking to employers, I come from Qatar also, and talking to employers, and if we focus on engineering a little bit, the feedback that we've been getting that our graduates are functional within 1 year. They are fully functional and independent. And all the efforts that we can do within the preparation of students in the university is to shorten this period of time so that they are functional in a faster way. So now, to bridge this gap, or to talk about how to bridge this gap, I think we should have more interaction. And I assume, or I claim that in, like at least in Qatar University, we managed to narrow this gap by many schemes. Some of these are external, so we involved industry representatives in committees in all levels of the university, starting from the board of regents. We have a few CEOs from big oil and gas companies, going down to the committees that oversee the colleges. We always have, or most of the representatives are from the stakeholders, mainly the oil and gas industries, and going even to the program level. We have committees that meet twice a year at least to look into the curriculum and to feedback on the preparation of the students. The main challenge that we face, I guess, and is related to what His Excellency mentioned about faculty members. Most of the faculty members that we have, they did the bachelor, master, PhD, and then they came back. Many of them, they did not practice, and they did not, they were not exposed to the requirements of the job market. So if you don't know the real skills or the real requirements of the job market, you may not be able to teach it to your students. So there should be some change in some of the policies within the university that will allow faculty members to be more exposed to the job market. And I can give two examples, if you wish, from Qatar University. We started a scheme a few years back to allow faculty members for summer placements in the industry, so they can go and work in the industry for a few months in the summer, so that they can understand better the skills that they need to teach to their students. And now we allow our faculty members to do sabbatical in the industry. In the past, we did not allow faculty members to do their sabbatical leave, or they should go to universities to be housed in other universities. Now we allow them to spend this sabbatical year in the universities to better understand the requirements. So there are things that are under our control. Accreditation, as was mentioned, is one constraint that we face, but it's not to that extent that it was mentioned. Accreditation actually is to us is a requirement. What we receive from the industry, that it's a requirement from the industry that they want. This is the only external benchmarking of our graduates, that they went through a program that's accredited from an outside entity. And more recently, many of the accreditation agencies, they focus on we have to prove to them that our educational objectives were developed in partnership with our stakeholders, and mainly industries and the places where our graduates work. So accreditation can be looked at from both angles. It's a constraint from one side, but it forced many of us, like in engineering, it forced us to form those committees on the different levels. And we have to show the minutes that we met, and we discussed the curriculum, and we discussed the things that we should introduce to in different parts of the curriculum to equip our students.
That's great, and it sounds like that measurement, the fact that you were measuring student success, has actually been critical to how you've actually adapted the university's strategy to be successful in placing your graduates and demonstrating to the industry that yours is a university or a school that provides almost industry-ready graduates, right? A case in point, yes, they need some ramp-up time. And I think the industry would argue that a ramp-up time is okay. It's the retraining that can be a challenge. But that sounds like you've come up with some interesting ways to address that within your university. Yes, sure. You'd like to comment?
Thanks, Orla. I'd just like to add a couple of points. What's important in doing all of these alignment between industry and private sector, and with the rapid change of technology, I mean, as I'm saying, today technology changes every 2 to 4 years. It's no longer in 8 years that we can look after. One of the things that we would be recommending to universities, and we've been consistently pushing for this, have certain curricula that is delivered by industry professionals in universities. So inject the industry into the university. It doesn't work to have the two separate. The university is separate from the private sector. The two have to work together. And by meaning work together, it doesn't work to have them on committees only. They need to be fully injected into the development plan or the teaching plan or the curricular plan of the university. That's the way to make it happen. It doesn't work for the students to do a project totally separate from the private sector. It needs to be fully integrated into the private sector, so it needs to address private sector requirements. If we're doing some of these items, then we have an alignment between private sector and academia. Then we have graduates who are basically graduating into the private sector, which basically ties the supply into the demand of the private sector, and in a fully structured manner. Today, if we have the two separate, and we're only judging graduates by how many hours they studied, and how many projects have they done, and how many books they've actually looked at, then that is not what the private sector wants, and they will not find employment. So are we graduating employees, or are we graduating employment or unemployment? One of the things that we would be looking, for example, at doing in the future, and there was a pilot actually done with the Ministry of Labor a couple of years ago, is building an information system that ties students graduating from secondary school, going into university, and then working at the private sector, whether locally or regionally, okay, through their national ID. And this would give the policymaker an idea: are we graduating employees employment from each of the universities, or are there any universities that are graduating total unemployment? So, and this would give an idea of where are we going with this. Until that happens, we at the ICT Association of Jordan, we've taken a step further in terms of building a ranking of universities. In Jordan, we don't have a ranking of universities. So we have 33 universities, 31 of them teach technology or ICT-related majors. All of them are equal when it comes to accreditation. To us, as a private sector, we're somehow we've been asking for a ranking of universities for some time, and we've built recently. There are a number of ways to rank universities. One is academic, but the other part is private sector perception, and it's a perception survey. We're currently doing that, and we will have results pretty soon.
It's good. Minister, I know you wanted to jump in there.
Yes,
Just switch on.
Yeah, I would like to just to focus on, the discussion going between the universities and the employment opportunities afterwards. But I don't wish to ignore the schools. I think probably we should really consider this issue, have thought of. If we leave out the schools, then we are in a desperate situation. I think schooling in developing countries, there is a huge room for improvement. The consistency of the schooling is not there. The distribution of the wealth of the major cities is definitely not the same as those who are on the outside and the outskirts of the other governorates. So, for example, a school in east of Amman is different than school in west of Amman, let alone school in Tafila or the southern part of Tafila or Karak or Ma'an, what have you. And this is probably what we have to now think of, having a sociologist, a psychologist with us to let us know what exactly we need to look into at which age before we actually move into giving and equipping our kids with the critical thinking methodologies and the communication skills and what have you skills. I think sometimes we don't wish for the students to move on to the universities, for example, particularly in Jordan and probably in developing countries. I think we should encourage them to go into ONCs, ONDs, HNDs, what have you, because those are the very important diplomas that are required very much so. So we cannot just wait for the universities to produce them and give them the opportunity to move into the employment, number one. Number two, I think I wish not to disagree with my colleague, but I disagree with him actually on this note, thinking that, well, give the students 1 year after graduation. I think students, they should be able to communicate prior to entry of the universities, let alone moving into the universities and obviously getting the workload that they should be doing, as I said before, not having 15 credit hours only at the universities without any extracurricular activities. You definitely are freezing their thoughts and abilities and moving them into the dilemma of what to do after they finish their graduation. So I think those issues have not to be, should not be discussed in isolation of the psychological setup of the kids and how could we actually inject those abilities at schools and at all schools and at a nationwide campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to reply? Yes.
Because His Excellency mentioned a really very important point about because we are at the university, we are asked to fill two gaps. Gap for students who are joining from high schools and then the gap with the job market. And we have to work on bridging both. But very quick note, not to be misunderstood, when I mentioned about they should be functional from, they cannot be functional from day one, I'm not referring to communication skills, for example. They should, I agree, they should be able to communicate very effectively upon graduation. What I meant is really to be fully functional in applying the knowledge that they have received in the university fully within the context of the company that they're working on.
Sure, and actually I think that's a very fair point the Minister made. The burden cannot be completely on the universities to fix the gaps that are coming before and the gaps with industry afterwards. I think we'd all agree with that. And in some ways I think that emphasises probably the need to discuss policy a little bit. Professor Katamine, I'd like to hear from you. You know, should policymakers implement a national labour strategy to include key components such as the skills development, capacity building, to avoid that challenge where perhaps we're developing skills at the wrong stage, and also to address the challenge that Mr. Shamlawi mentioned earlier, that perhaps we overproduce the number of graduates in a particular area. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that from a policy perspective.
You've launched a very huge question, Orla, but I'd like to tackle it from a different point of view, and then I'll move on to your question. We are at the moment in Jordan going through a very tough situation whereby, for example, we are in the middle of this moving region, unfortunately for some countries, but the fact that we've gone through Arab Spring and the aftermath of the Arab Spring and the recessions that have followed up the Arab Spring, and also the fact that we are going through some civil wars in some neighboring countries, unfortunate wars again in neighboring countries, has forced a lot of people to come to Jordan. And the fact again that we are very much in trying to help those people who are moving into Jordan, and because we are one unified occupied Arab region. Happily, we are very hospitable, and we are very proud of this hospitality, and we would like to look after all of our friends who are seeking refugee, for example, or actually moving to Jordan because of the stability that we're going through. Now, that meant that we, at the moment, we are looking into at least 2 million people who are ready to work in Jordan, and they're not Jordanians. So this is probably the biggest challenge that any country in the world would actually face. At the time when you are trying to sort out some issues related to employment and unemployment, and the looking into the youth and putting strategies, no strategy would actually withstand the vigorous amount of pressure that you are having on the infrastructure of Jordan. We've been trying our best to communicate this through, and from this platform, I'm asking all the world to actually assist Jordan to make sure that we are able to provide whatever we can to the infrastructure in order to take care of our friends who are at the moment in Jordan. Happily, they are in Jordan, and we also are very happy for them to find jobs. And we would like to assure you that we have at least 24 agreements with the ILO and the various NGOs and the foreign national agencies that are looking after the foreigners in Jordan. We're proudly, obviously, respecting all of those clauses, but again, we are suffering a serious issue. Now, moving back to the policymakers, I don't understand how a policymaker would be able to actually put any strategy amidst this kind of challenge, number one. Number two, this is not the first challenge. Jordan has been the hub for all of their neighboring countries, again, happily, and this is something that we're proud of, that the Hashemites are concentrating on, receiving our neighbors when they are in need to come and reside in Jordan. But it has been going on actually for almost 4 or 5 decades, and every 10 years we have an extra increase of population in Jordan for at least 10 to 15% of the population. Again, not one country back in history could actually equip itself to meet those challenges. I am a Minister of Labor, and I look at policies and strategies, and I just, at the end of the day, I throw them in the bin because they are meaningless when I have to deal with a daily influx of people wanting to live, have to find out various resources to survive, and I cannot just implement any policies that I can see on the shelf. We're having through a very tough circumstances situation now in Jordan, but we are trying to take it as we go. Basically, it's, resolve the issues as you go. That's how we're doing. But the policy making, very important. At the moment, we're trying to maneuver within a very narrow threshold, but I don't think we are doing well in forwarding policies for the labor market. This is in addition to the fact that the labor market itself is not ready to actually, like Mr. Shamlawi just said, I mean, I don't think they are ready to meet the influx of such an increase of demand and the pressure that the infrastructure is forcing itself into. Jordan 6 months ago is 5 times more now than Jordan 5 months ago, in every respect, because of the 2 million people that we're having here in Jordan, in the north, in the south, and everywhere. Wherever I go, I am criticized that, what are you doing? How could we actually find jobs? What are you doing to the refugees that were here? So it's a catch-22 situation. We're trying to have it on balance. We're happy to solve whoever is in need for any assistance in Jordan. But again, this is actually putting the foot down on the economy and the foot down on the infrastructure, which is very, very unfortunate for Jordan.
Thank you. And Deputy Minister, from your perspective in Iraq, how important is the policy making to helping you address the the demands of the labor market?
It's very important, and we in Iraq, we are facing a lot of challenges. Number one is the public sector is employing people on the major basis, and the private sector is paralyzed. So we have a challenge of revitalizing and creating a good private sector. On this, let's say, process, my ministry, MOLSA, has taken some important steps. We have produced the strategies of national employment with the academic people and also with the industry and also the labor unions. After consecutive and serious meetings and workshops, we produced the strategies of national employment policy, and that's been ratified and implemented by the Council of Ministers last year. in March last year. As a result of that, we have created the High Commission for National Employment. So Ministry of Labor is heading that committee, that commission, and 13 ministries, national ministries, are participating partners in that project. As a result of that, also my ministry has taken other measures. Professor Shamlawi said the period of unemployment, we have set it up as 6 months. Graduate from the universities can have the access to create his own private job or private company, and we help him with small and medium loans, interest-free, after he presenting a visibility study on a project, and also on the project should be helping the labor market as well. So after that, we put him on CAP, Know About Business course, and then we give him the loan, and he will go and help, and that by then we have vitalized and helped the private sector to promote. We have created, or let's say designed, in phase 1, 33 packages, vocational training packages. My vocation training department has created 33, which we launched them last year, and then another 17, total of 51 training packages being designed according to the labor market and also to geographic areas of Iraq. Every city, what he needs, the labor market, what we inject people and trainers to train people and to get them employment. So we have taken those measures in Iraq, and I think we might not get the results very soon, but that's on long term. We have built up a network on an infrastructure, as His Excellency the Minister said, the infrastructure of the private sector and also the communication, as Dr. Shamlawi said, between the private sector and public sector and the whole parties is very, very essential. And in the meantime, working for vocational training, I will say training, training, training.
Thank you very much, and we're almost up on our time. It's been a very interesting debate, and it's so many facets to this. You know, we have the industry side, the academia side, just in terms of the challenges of completing courses, educating faculty, and delivering relevant skills to a job market that continues to change also very quickly, and then how do you create a policy that can help with that as well. So we're almost up, but very quickly I just want to leave you an opportunity to say one thing very quickly if you all have. I'll maybe start with you down at the end.
Thanks. Just on the point of the influx of people that we're facing in Jordan, and if we look at the educational systems around us in the Arab world, the trick at the moment with the changing requirements of private sector and basically unpredictability of economies and what's happening in the region, the trick, to be honest with you, that we're witnessing, and that's also proven by a number of studies in Europe and a number of areas, is the ability to train and retrain quickly. So if the public and private sector reach into, and obviously the private sector is the faster to adapt to this. So if the private and public sector reached into an agreement or some sort of a structure where you can create a training and retraining programs that can adapt the skills of people according to the requirements of the economy, this is a good solution.
Okay.
Another solution that is also important, skills can be actually outsourced. So if we have today 1,000 people who can do a data entry, which is a vocational job, we can go and sell them to outsourcing companies globally. And if we can put these together, then we can so again, it's train and retrain and quickly.
I think the buzzword train and retrain is good. Ms. Al-Rashid.
Yes, I'd like to add just a quick comment in the end before everybody leaves to lunch, which is I see that everybody actually I don't really agree with Abed that much. They do speak a similar language, but when it comes to implementation, everybody, just moves in a different direction. And there's been a few initiatives actually between industry and academia that have been proven successful. However, we need to base on these and just keep following up and following through, and we need to maintain the momentum. We also need to create awareness with the students themselves as to what their expectations should be and what other industries there are that give them better job opportunities.
Broaden their horizons, indeed. Professor Cook.
Thank you. I don't think there's anyone in this room that would deny that education is the answer to the social and development of each of our countries. I came first to the Middle East in 1968 to the American University of Beirut, and I've been in higher education for 45 years and in the Middle East for 30 of them. During that period, we've seen a tremendous number of universities created, and we heard the ministers from all the countries talk with pride about the both public and private universities that have been created. There's a challenge in all of this, and the challenge, and maybe this is especially true for the private for-profit institutions, and GUST is an example of a private for-profit institution, is that their sustainability is going to be based on the quality of their programs. And I think every country is most likely starting and doing this, but they have to be able to assess the quality of the programs. And in terms of the topic we're discussing today, the industry input and the quality of the graduates has to be a very important element in that assessment.
Thank you very much. Deputy Minister, would you like to just say a few closing words?
Yeah, I think looking into the debates of today, I think we need regional cooperation and coordination with all programs, because we have the programs, as the professor said, we need a follow-up and also to implement the issues, and then to get the outcome, and also evaluate the outcome on the regional basis, because there are countries with good, let's say, budgets, and countries with poor budgets, but we need all to coordinate and to build a regional infrastructure of labor market, employment, and training.
Thank you very much. And Professor Hasna.
One quick note, I think as universities, one of the areas that we can contribute to the solution of this is to better equip our graduates with entrepreneurial skills. I think our graduates now, we've been focusing on making them fit to a certain sector, like for example in Qatar, oil and gas sector, but we are not equipping them enough with the skills with which they can start their own businesses and create their own companies. I think this is an area that can contribute to the solution of the problems that we talked about.
Thank you very much. And last but definitely not least, Minister.
Thank you, Orla. Well, again, this is very tough statements I'm going to make, but I feel confident to make them. I am very sad to see the Arab world is going through the very difficult circumstances at the moment. And I agree with Professor Cook that definitely universities should be the hub which actually should develop the whole Middle East, if we're talking about the Middle East. But unfortunately, the universities need a lot of shake-ups. I very much think that the universities are not at a stage where they could actually reshape any country that they are at. I mean, looking at the ranking of the universities in accordance with all specifications or criteria, I don't think the Arab universities or Arabic universities, not all of them, but most of them, at least for Jordan, I'll talk about Jordan, we're not in a position to actually think that we could actually do anything for graduates to be able to melt within the labor market. I think there's a lot of work to be carried out, and I hope that this can be, this title of this session could be actually a very nice conference for the future workshop to address this particular important issue now, which is actually, I'm very happy that we're talking about it, education for employment. This is something new, and it's a talk of town, by the way. Most of agencies in Jordan now, they've come to me as a minister, and they're actually wanting to do something for it, and they want to make it in the speed of light, with online, with e-learnings, with what have you. So it's a very important important topic. Universities are incapable of looking into it at the moment. They need to reshape their various strategies to actually be able to look at the markets and see how they could do the bridging. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know many of our industry partners here will be very happy. I know Oracle will be to assist the universities of Jordan in that journey. I'd like to thank all of our esteemed panel for their contribution this morning. I think it's been very useful. I'm very mindful that I'm standing between you and lunch, and John is here on my right, so I'm going to hand you right over to John. Thank you very much.